Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Alberta Freemason podcast. I'm Preston Meyer, chaplain and past master of Acacia Lodge number 11 in Edmonton, and the editor of this production.
Right Worshipful James Eilander. I'm currently the District Deputy Grand Master for Phoenix District 13. I'm also a past master of Zetland 83 and affiliated with Goose in the Gridiron number 203.
I'm Mike Johnson, Senior Grand Warden, Grand Lodge of Alberta, and also member of Baseline Lodge and Strathcona Lodge.
I'm John Hayes. I'm currently the Worshipful Master for the second time of Highlands Unity 168 in Edmonton. I'm also the past Sovereign Grand Master of the Allied Masonic Degrees of Canada.
Bill Brook, past DDGM of the Athabasca District, current Secretary of Lodge 195.
So the discussion today is about how we can improve retention in lodges. A lot of us do a decent job of getting in new guys, but even those of us who are finding success in bringing in new members often struggle to keep them. So I want to talk about strategies that we can implement to fix that problem.
I definitely see a good connection between like retention and mentorship. I think when we're looking at retention and mentorship and the guys we're getting in, we have to like understand the dynamics of the personalities at play to have like meaningful mentorship and engagement. And it's so much Masonic stuff. And I'm like, well, this isn't working. Like we keep looking at the same stuff and like tooting our own horn and going in a circle. So I one of the parts I looked at was Canadian Military Journal. It was like volume 21, number 2. And it was authored by Timothy Stackhouse. He's not a Mason, but he points to like survey results for millennials and Gen Z, which I find relevant to Freemasonry, especially for like retention. And his survey, like while his survey is in regard to like young soldiers, we can look at it and find out how it relates to like a formal organization like ours. If you don't mind, like I could go through a couple of the results and everything of what young soldiers want in order to stay in the military. And it's the first set of results pertain to what motivates, engages, and retains millennials. And the first point was motivation. So motivation frequently comes from praise, recognition, and reward. They want to be noticed for their work and achievements. Another survey result from Stackhouse's paper was flexibility is desired, as is the want for work-life balance, training, and development opportunities. Another relevant result was while orientation and probationary period is understandable, there is an expectation to excel quickly through the ranks. And frequent contact with their leadership allows the sense of belonging. That's like an important one for them. And the next set of results, which were interesting, is on the different personality traits of millennials and Gen Z, with an important note that reprimand is not an appropriate course of action. So rather, millennials and Gen Z are more fearless and tend to be blunter than previous generations, which I never would have guessed, kind of thing. Also have expectations that mentors will approach them, not vice versa. And not just one mentor is suitable, but rather the idea of seeking different perspectives is common. And expect leaders should dedicate more one-on-one succession planning at an earlier stage. Well, it also noted concerns about leadership. So leadership losing touch with this generation of employees, noting such traits as micromanaging, negativity, condescending, inconsistency, cynicism, and disorganization. Sounds a little familiar at times, I think. And the last few points touch on the need of this new generation, which is the desire to understand the history, culture, and norms of the organization, as well as why this history exists. The desire to learn from experience comes from the experience, not from titles or appointments. And a strong sense of community combined with listing tolerance and acceptance as core values. They're extremely confident, loyal, and committed. Well, can you see a parallel in all these? Like we look for look at those results from the perspective of youth joining an organization to feel a sense of belonging and brotherhood, yet we fail to listen to their needs. And when we enter into a mentorship relationship, we need to know the personalities and the wants of the new members we're working to retain. I just thought like that part of the paper with the survey results really reflects Freemasonry. We talk about it in the general charge, like, oh, you will in a gentle manner, all those kind of things. And this touches on it. It's not something new.
It isn't anything new, and I think it reflects just a slight difference in the generational take, but in many ways, many of the same things. And as you say, it's in the general charge, and that hails from the 1880s in Ontario. It makes a lot of sense. One of the things that struck me in what you said was that we set out expectations, and mentorship shouldn't happen from the point where they've taken their obligation. So they're obligated. Now you're going to mentor them. And in that sense, mentorship just becomes memory coaching. We really have to look at it as a more holistic package of mentorship. We set up the expectations before they apply, even so that they understand what they're getting into and why. Because if they don't know why they're joining or what they're joining, and not with any details or secrets, but what and why are critical, if they don't know what they're joining, so they're joining blind, there's a pretty good chance that they won't find what they expect. And so if we set up no expectations, or we hide the expectations, or even worse, we bait and switch, so we set up expectations and then don't come anywhere near meeting them, then we're really in a pickle. The other thing that I thought was interesting in what you said was that they shouldn't just have one mentor. And I've heard in lodge after lodge that the sponsor should mentor the candidate, or the mentorship committee should mentor the candidate. And let's face it, in many cases, the mentorship committee is one guy. And really, there ought to be 3 or 4 or 5 experts in various parts of the organization, and they should all mentor him. So I'm a member of a business networking organization that has a mentorship program, and we have 11 mentors with specific focuses. And it's our job as mentors to micro mentor the new candidate on the specific 1 or 2 things that is up to us to give. So we don't have to deliver the whole mentorship package. We just have to say, I'm here to deliver line item G, which is this and this. So let's talk about that. And at the end of the mentorship program, they've checked off all 11 boxes, and they should be happily mentored into this organization. Freemasonry is much more complicated and much more esoteric and meaningful than a business networking group, but we don't do as good a job of welcoming people with fair and accurate reflections of what they're getting into. And so we need to be, as Mike says, welcoming, honest, but also forthright and candid and energetic. We can't sit back and not be energetic. And of all the things that our Grandmaster brings to the meetings now, energy is the thing that stands out from him. He is so energetic all the time that he makes the rest of us look like tired men. So like a hockey team, we have to raise up our performance on the day.
Yeah, you were talking about those programs, and that's definitely like a formal program. And I think we also need to really balance the formal with the informal, just because the formal takes up that human capital, that all the resources, the dedicated procedures and the criteria, where we can also begin with like the informal side. So you have that mentorship, and then that bond of the informal mentorship usually leads to that bond of friendship. And those friendships are also really what connects us and keeps us going back. I've been driving to the same lodge for over 20 years in a city that I've never lived in, nor do I even live close to it. But it's the guys that I built this bond of friendship with. And my one mentor, who's like my good friend now, he's now my travel guy. He's my roommate. He's for all that kind of stuff. And he's the guy I can call and talk to. And that's my retention, is the friendships I built up. And it's all because of the informal stuff. But it's augmented by the formal stuff, because like you have those teachings, but then you have somebody to sit down with and kind of break them apart and ask some more questions and stuff in an informal setting.
I think it really starts, the motivation of why we're encouraging people to join lodge to begin with. I happen to live in the north end of the city of Airdrie. If I drive 5 minutes up the road, I'm in Crossfield. There's three lodges there. I was encouraged to attend a lodge downtown Calgary that, I work in the city all day. I drive back to Airdrie. I get changed. I drive back into Airdrie. My mentor had great motives because he knew it would be a personal fit for me. He knew it would be the experience I was looking for. He had my best interests at heart. And then unfortunately, we have, some lodges, and unfortunately, they tend to be more of the rural nature, where, hey, come join my lodge, and their motivation is, uh, we gotta cover our budget. Like we need more members because we need more revenue, and that's going to keep our dues at whatever rate you've decided to be charging for the last 30 years because you just can't understand price of things goes up. So if you're just bringing people in to suit your needs without recognizing that, you have to give them an experience, that this is part of the responsibility, that by bringing them into the craft, um, uh, we use the term mentorship. Let's face it, what were Masons and what was the nature of it? Well, anybody that's worked in the trades, it's an apprenticeship. You're taking in young men that have started to hit the point where, maybe they're having families, maybe they're starting career paths, and you're passing your life experience on to them from this well that you've drawn upon, and who, others gave you the same experience. And so there's a responsibility that comes with that. You can't just bring them in because, you gotta have a certain revenue to keep your budget a certain place. You have to take the responsibility to teach these individuals.
Part of the issue, and like you said, some of these lodges are on life support. So part of the issue is the fact that they need those numbers. If you have a lodge that's more sustainable, and you can adopt something like a 7-step program, and then all of a sudden you're bringing those new guys that are interested in Freemasonry, and you can kind of walk them through the steps before they actually get the petition, and they get to know the guys that are in the lodge. They come to the festive boards, they come to social events and stuff like that. And then at that point, they'll get a good taste and feel of, oh, this is what Freemasonry is about. Here's the type of guys that are actually here. And they'll gravitate towards that, or they'll be like, this isn't for me. And at that point, like, you're not even giving them a petition yet. And they might say, yeah, this just isn't for me. But the minute you give a petition, there has to be an onus on those sponsors. You sponsored this individual. That means that you need to mentor him. And that individual, 9 times out of 10, when they've joined because of the sponsors that they had. So they're more receptive to the sponsor to mentor them. And if there's a connection there, then he'll move it forward. If there's not, and it's not something that he wants to do, well, you had a good cup of coffee. If the spark is there, it's your job to try to fan that into a flame.
What I hear in this discussion is there's this dynamic between the corporate needs of Freemasonry, the lodge, the Grand Lodge, and the individual needs of the Masons. And they're not the same thing. And I
No.
think too often we assume they are the same thing and
Yeah.
mask that kind of stuff in a one of those sayings like you get out of Freemasonry what you put into Freemasonry, as if somehow the individual will get everything out that he wants, provided he commits himself more and more to the lodge. But
Mhm.
just like we can't look at the individual Mason as a lodge support unit, we can't look at the lodge as a hall support unit. And we also can't look at the lodge as a district or a Grand Lodge support unit. We need to address the concerns of the individuals and of the lodge. If we do that, the lodge will be very strong. I see this dynamic where um, we have the corporate needs of the lodge, succession planning, financial, that kind of stuff, pulling in one direction. And we have the wants of the individuals pulling in the other. And I think when they miss each other completely, that's when we lose members. That's when retention doesn't happen. And I think If we can address the missed points where the needs don't mesh, right? Then we will be able to address retention issues in a way that is really meaningful. The sponsors need to be a major part of the candidates, but I don't think that's because they're going to be their key mentors. I think that's because they're going to be their key friends. And they will mentor by being their friends. And yeah, you join because you know the guy or you know a couple of people. And 80% of Masons join because a friend is a member and talks to them about it. Um, Obviously, that person is going to stay on as a friend. What that person will also become is a mentor. But let and I won't name names, but we've had people who are relatively new Masons sponsor candidates. They don't know enough to mentor them. They're bringing in their friends. Remember that the 24-year-old Mason will know way more 20-year-old men who aren't Masons than the 65-year-old Mason will. So they're the source of the the candidates and the members, but they aren't the repository of the knowledge. And so we as an organization have to figure out how to juxtapose that.
And James, like you brought up a good point too about like bringing a candidate to a lodge that suits him. We need to do that too for a more seasoned member before he quits. So if the lodge is no longer meeting his needs, if he moves, that night doesn't work for him, he's not jiving with all the guys in that meeting, bring him to visit and be like, you can go join another lodge. You don't
Mhm.
have to quit. You don't have to leave Freemasonry. And so many guys don't realize that. I did that for one gentleman. I brought him to a lodge. I'm like, you know what? This one's going to be really good for you. And he stayed on. So he demitted from his lodge, but he joined another lodge. So he's still a
Yeah.
member and still active. And we have to keep in mind we have a big, diverse group of guys. We have the guys that join for those many different reasons, like they want to go for beers. You have the guys that are more on the esoteric side. They want that more enlightenment, the knowledge and stuff, and they can go and have those conversations. They can find those like-minded brothers and everything, and that's really going to be a strong point for retention, is finding those meaningful connections and knowing that you're in a spot where you can meet those guys.
Yeah, it's a little frustrating that we get distracted from the individual needs and the that feeling of brotherly love that we talk so much about when the Grand Lodge has really one metric for success of the individual lodges is how many of your guys are paying dues. But if we stop thinking about the corporate needs and think about serving the individual needs of the brethren, the corporate needs are going to be met naturally. So we need to make sure that we're focusing our attention where it needs to be.
I think that's it. And this goes back probably to Chris Hodap or even before him, where you talk about the three-legged stool and it can't stand if one of the legs isn't there. And so if there's no social merriment, what is the word in the charge? Social intercourse, I believe is the word. And there's this exchange of these friendships and the essentially brotherly love amongst the guys. And they do that in turkey shoots or curling or bowling or scotch tasting or going to an Elks game, whatever they're going to do. And then you've got the bureaucratic side of it. And it's a necessity, and we all know it, but we don't have to make the meetings all about it. And then the third side of it is the content. So people join Masonry because it's not a shooting club. I mean, they join it because it's something else. It's not just necessarily the esotericism, but the meaningful discussions at some level have to be there too. Because if there aren't, you may as well just go to the pub. But if someone asks me why I joined Freemasonry, I'll tell them because I really like it. And I'll say, I joined Freemasonry and didn't really know what I was joining. My dad was a Freemason, but I didn't join his lodge. A friend was a Freemason. I did join his lodge. But it was only after a year or two that I realized I'd joined something that really was meaningful to me. People don't join Freemasonry or talk about it generally because it's something they understand. Most of our members joined kind of blind, and they joined because they had a family connection, or they had a friend, or they saw something online and sent a note in. But the people who join for a reason from the outside are often the people who get the least out of it, because they don't get what they thought they would get. They don't get, the keys to the um, the spaceship under Mount St. Helens, and they don't get the yeah, I know it's shocking but true, and they don't get, there isn't $170,000 US that shows up in their checking account after their second year of membership. None of that happens. What you do get is you get the opportunity to be really good friends with some really good people, both men and women who I've met through the men. The opportunity is wonderful. And if someone asks me why I'm a member, I say, because it's something I really love doing.
We talk a lot in our ritual about brotherly love, relief, and truth. And each of those things are things that we need to really put some effort into delivering to the people who knock on our doors. Brotherly love, that fraternal social framework that we rely on to exist as happy humans. Relief when it becomes necessary, hopefully less often than in reality it is, but being engaged in helping one another a little bit more than just socializing. And then that pursuit of truth, of knowledge of all varieties.
We don't actually talk about the liberal arts and sciences that much. We're told we should make a daily advancement in Masonic knowledge. I dare say that only a small percentage of people do that. For me, this is great because I love this kind of thing. I could talk about stuff and learn about stuff from you guys. Like, you guys have said several things today that have, light bulb went off, or I've made a few notes of things that I might want to look up later. That's great. For me, that's how I like to do these things. Um, but I suspect that if someone joined an unnamed lodge in some place that we aren't there, so it's none of our lodges, and walked in and said, "Well, where's the content? What was that saying 510 million years ago? Where's the beef?" In a real way, I don't think there's very much beef in a lot of lodges. There is the bureaucracy and the process and the degrees. And I had one past master of a lodge that won't be named look me in the eye and say, "You should never do anything other than the degrees. Everything is in the degrees." He could not have been more wrong. He could not have been more sure of himself either.
Right. And if it takes half an hour, 45 minutes of the meeting to have those discussions, perfect. Right. And that's where you're going to get more involvement, and you're going to get more worth out of a meeting. When you give them that, and it can speak to their soul almost, you're going to retain guys because they're going to be like, that was an awesome meeting. I love that. I love that discussion. I learned something tonight. I want more of that. I want to come back to the next meeting. What are we going to talk about in the next meeting, right? So, and it's really important to hone in on that education piece, because it's one piece in all of our regular meetings and everything. Almost 90% of our lodges, I can tell you, probably just skip right over it. Oh, I don't have anything tonight. We'll just move on, right? And kind of doing a disservice to everybody that came to the meeting, because that is the one big meaningful piece that you will get out of that regular meeting.
Education is the easiest part to fail to prepare sufficiently.
Yeah.
And so that's why we so often fail there. But every meeting, like you said, needs to have a reason to celebrate that meeting and want more of the same. And if the most interesting bit of your meeting was an argument on the dues going up or staying the same, or reading the minutes, yeah, you're going to lose guys.
Worshipful brother Gord Bristol, he's at Foothills Calvin Grove. And it's a point he's been focusing on for some time. They were experiencing a significant decline in membership. They were initiating lots of members, but the retention was rather lacking. I forget the numbers he said, but it was like maybe like 1 in 10. And the lodge was getting burnt out by it. Education is great if that's what your lodge wants to do. If that's what your lodge wants to focus on, perfect, because then you're meeting the needs of the membership. His whole presentation was, listen, Foothills Calvin Grove was at a point where they felt as a lodge they didn't really have an identity. What was the purpose? Why were they coming together? We all have the ritual, that's part of it, the initiation process, sure. But why were they coming together? And so they did a survey, and the title of his presentation is fantastic. He submitted this as a paper to the AMD, and it was meeting the expectations of the lodge. How many lodges actually ask their membership what they want? Maybe it's just social interaction. Been to a lodge and they did Masonic Jeopardy. What a great night. Fantastic. Maybe they want the education. Maybe they want the esoteric. They want to know that little bit of deeper stuff. And if the majority of lodge, that's what they're looking for, then good, you're meeting their needs. Maybe some guys just want to sit down and have a meal together because it's the only opportunity they get to do that. And you can come together as a lodge and you can do just about anything you want to do within the confines of, you know, uh, performing the ritual as stated, observing the CNR, all these other things. You want to be a train lodge? You want to play with model trains? Play with model trains. It can be your lodge meeting. You want to get together and you want to throw some darts after, you want to ride motorcycles, you want to whatever brings you together as a fraternity, uh, you figure it out. What happens is that, we've got lodges that are 100 years old and it's like, well, this is how we did it 100 years ago. Well, guess what? That was 100 years ago. The guys you've got every 10 years are not the same guys. They're not the same makeup. It's not the same synergy. Half the lodge is new within the last 5 years. Good. Put a survey up. Ask them, hey guys, how do you feel the meetings are going? Do you feel you're getting worth? Do you feel you're getting an experience in return for what you're paying for your dues? What would you like to see? What would you like to try? It's not a popular thing to say, but sometimes it's okay if a lodge dies. It's not the end of the world. Like, you know what? If that vision has changed so much in 40 years and guys want to go off and start their own thing and do it under another vision, good, because you know what? Then you're going to want to do it and they're going to do it together and nobody's forcing anybody to participate. They want to.
The question about retention comes all the way back to if you ask them what they want and they tell you and you provide them what they want, you can have a pretty good chance of retaining them as members. I don't think it's that complicated. That goes back to what Mike said originally and James said. And at the end of the day, our goal should be to ask them what they want and provide them. The ones who are quiet, they have opinions too, and it's up to us to draw them out a bit.
And I suspect the ones who are quiet are the ones who are most likely to disappear soon.
Yeah, honestly, I think at the end of the day, you have to have fun with this. If you have fun and you make it interesting, you're going to keep the guys.
Really, the key to a lot of enjoyment of Freemasonry is incorporated in the general charge. If we really listen to it, if we really take in what it says and we actually act that way, we don't have to look a lot further because it's all about having a good time while doing the moral and social improvement.
Happiness and sharing that happiness.
Yeah, exactly.
If you ask the question and you get an answer and you don't want to do anything about it, you can't just keep pretending that the problem's not there anymore. You've identified the problem. And then now if you just sit back and don't do anything about it, it's kind of on you.
For sure. The lodge has a lot of responsibility to all of the men who walk through its doors. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Alberta Freemason with voices from across Alberta and music from our grand organist, very worshipful brother Lardeon Ranon. Happy to meet, sorry to part, happy to meet again.
Hey, do you want to come to a really bad board meeting and talk about some accounts? So maybe argue over $50?
Only
You know what?
if it's followed up by bad food and mediocre
Yeah.
coffee.